Day on 100 Yards of Football. Our guest today is an NCAA legend and a professional in two sports who needs no introduction. So with our introduction today for our illustrious guest, we promise not to be long, but we promise we must be strong. So let's get it on. In presenting to you, the man who originated from Titletown, Valdosta, Georgia, where he was a member of the Valdosta High School State Championship baseball team and the quarterback to the storied Valdosta High School football program, known as the winningest high school football program in the nation. After graduation from Valdosta High School, he was drafted by the Chicago White Sox in the second round out of high school, but selected to become a student athlete at the great University of Georgia, where he would go on to be twice selected as a first-team All-SEC quarterback. He was named the captain for the 1981 SEC champion Georgia Bulldogs. And prior to that, he wrote his name down in history by becoming the quarterback of the University of Georgia's 1980 National Championship team. As a two-sport star at the University of Georgia, where he became a 4-year starter on the Georgia baseball team. He was twice selected as a first-team All-SEC outfielder and led the SEC in hitting. In 1981, he was honored as the SEC Athlete of the Year. And coming out of Georgia, he was drafted once again into pro baseball by the Montreal Expos, and 3 years with the Montreal Expos organization. He would subsequently go on to play pro football in the USFL with the Jacksonville Bulls, a veteran of 2+ decades of sports talk radio analyst. And now he's the new author of his own biographical piece, now available to the public, called Inside the Hedges, available on InsideTheHedges.com. He's a member of the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame. He's also a member of the Valdosta Sports Hall of Fame. And he's a member of the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to 100 Yards of Football, the legendary Buck Belue.
If you like the video today, please come in and share it. We'll surely appreciate it here on 100 Yards of Football. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. Before we start, I'd like to give kudos to our producer today, Mr. Jeremiah Long, for making it happen for us today. And today, joining us also, he's a Colorado State grad, Atlanta Falcon great, the very talented Mr. Harper LeBel. So if you like the video today, please come in and share it. So Mr. Harper LeBel, let's get this party started with our guest today, Mr. Buck Belue.
What an introduction, Buck. We don't even need to do a show. It was already done for us.
I'm going to have to hang out with you guys more often.
Well, the name precedes itself. Let's go back a little bit at the history of Georgia football. In 1942, the University of Georgia wins the national championship. 38 years later, they have to wait until you're on campus to make that happen again. We're going to go over that. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happened since. And obviously, the present day Georgia roster has loads and loads of talent on it, and they may win another national championship. They are favorites right now. But, Buck, my first question to you, going back as a kid, remember Valdosta here in the introduction that we did, was Georgia on the map and on the radar for you from a very early age? Was that a part of your family, your history? And when did it first become a possibility for you to actually go to the university and be a part of the program?
Well, Harper, my father played high school football and baseball in Macon at Lanier High School. And my grandmother, as I was born, growing up in Valdosta, she was living in Athens. And my grandfather, I never had a chance to meet. He had passed away before I was born. So she was living alone in Athens. And, growing up in Valdosta, we would make a trip up to Athens several times a year, and we would pick out a weekend where Georgia had a home football game. And then in the spring, we'd go visit when Georgia would have a home baseball series. So we went up and saw Mama Sarah, and I was able to visit with her and take in some Georgia football and baseball. And we did that every year as I grew up in Valdosta. So, I became a Georgia fan at that point in time. And, my father was a big Georgia fan. So, yeah, we from the very beginning admired and dreamed about being a part of that program.
That's incredible that you get to kill two birds with one stone. Obviously getting to see grandma and get a pinch on the cheek and something to eat, but then to be exposed from a very early age. Was there a time maybe before high school or while you were at Valdosta that you go, I need to work a little bit harder because I have a goal and a vision that maybe some of the other kids didn't have at the time, that helped propel you from a mental, a physical, an emotional aspect to where you had a vision to go there and you knew you needed to fulfill that by working out a little bit harder, running a little bit faster, doing some extra things in the batting cage? What was that like for you?
Well, none of that seemed like work. Just had a love and a passion for both football and baseball growing up in Valdosta. As I narrowed down the college options, I felt like I needed to take a really complete look at the programs that were interested. And it really was a lot easier on me because a lot of these football programs, just Alabama, for example, Bear Bryant said, son, we've never had a football player play baseball, and we sure the hell aren't going to start with you. So there were some programs that made it easy. They eliminated themselves. And I narrowed it down to Tennessee, Florida State, and Georgia, the final three. And, when it came time to make a decision, I thought, I don't know one person on the Tennessee and Florida State campus. And I've got my grandmother in Athens, so I know I'm going to be comfortable there. I had a teammate from Valdosta High playing at Georgia, so I had some connections there in town. And at the end of the day, I just realized, this is where I needed to go. This is where I was going to be the most comfortable.
Hey, Bo, it looks in the picture here like you're wearing some spot belts, but they're white like Joe Willie. Hey, at the prom, did you wear a light blue tux with white platform shoes?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. This was the early 70s, man. And,
I
I grew up, I was a big fan of Steve Bartkowski. And so I admired Bart throwing that ball at Cal back in the day, and then followed his career with the Atlanta Falcons. And so I tried to look like Bart, man. I wanted the hairstyle that Bartkowski had. And I wanted to stand tall in the pocket, and those platform shoes made me almost as tall as Steve. So, yeah, that's what the motivation was Steve Bartkowski.
Man, you've got the hair going. You look like his little brother right there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Bart, I just was a big fan and, still admire Bart and what he was able to get done with the Atlanta Falcons organization. And, I've gotten to know him through the years, and that was a big thrill getting to know Bart.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Well, speaking of getting to know people, for the folks that aren't very familiar with the story, you've mentioned it on numerous occasions, but if our listeners haven't heard it before, you're in the conversation with Paul Bear Bryant, and you're kind of telling him the way that you are going to present yourself at Alabama. I want to play baseball also, Coach. What was it like meeting him for the first time? Was the aura around him? You knew enough about college and the sporting world, and with Vince Dooley and John McKay and some of these legends that are a part of the NCAA and football in and of itself. What was that like for you, just shaking his hand and sitting down in a one-on-one meeting with the man?
Well, it was a thrill. Obviously Alabama was winning, it seemed like every weekend back then. And I admired Coach Bryant and what he was able to accomplish at Alabama. And I couldn't wait, growing up in Valdosta playing for a winning high school program, great admiration for what Coach Bryant was doing at Alabama. And so, when I made my official visit to Tuscaloosa, it was a big thrill. On Sunday morning after one of the home games, they allowed the recruits that were in town one by one. We went in his office. It had to be 7 a.m., 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning, when we got 15, 20 minutes with Coach in his office. And, he had these little index cards with all of our information. And, he was looking at mine, and, he ran across that me wanting to play two sports. And that's when he gave me that memorable line of, we never had a football player play baseball. We're not going to start with you. And I couldn't wait to get back home and tell my dad, my grandfather, that story, because if the truth be told, Harper, they were running the wishbone, and I had no desire to go to Alabama and run the wishbone, but I had to get over there just to look behind the curtain,
Yeah,
and to see how they were winning all those games.
It's an amazing history. We will discuss that later on in a couple weeks. We're going to look at Alabama, but for right now, it's the University of Georgia. Vincent, I know I've been taking all the show right now.
How you doing, Mr. Buck?
Man, we're glad to be with you. Thanks so much.
Man, I'm going to tell you this, man. True story. Me and you came out of high school the same year in 1978. I've been knowing about you since I was 17 years old. Grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. Grew up in an area where I had about 4 guys that played football at Tennessee. But I didn't play, but I remember my senior year, I used to go to this bookstore that was about 2 blocks from the University of Memphis campus, at the time Memphis State. And they had this high school football book with all the top high school players in the country. John Forcade, Art Schlichter, Butch Woolfolk, A.J. Jones, Chip Banks, Ricky Gray. And I look down at the bottom of the page and I see this name, Buck Belue out of Valdosta, Georgia. So I said to myself, quarterback, right? And I said, Valdosta, the only guy that I know from Valdosta was this guy named Stan Roan, who was shooting them jumpers at Clemson. So I said, you know what? I saw where you was recruited. So my 2 homeboys, they came to Tennessee in 79. Carlton Peoples and Mark Studaway. You should know him. Carlton started at corner. Mark was a backup tackle with Reggie White. So Carlton was dating my sister at the time, but they hadn't committed to Tennessee. So I went to the University of Arkansas when you was at Georgia your first year. And so when I came on Christmas, I saw Carlton. I said, hey, man, what y'all going to do at the quarterback position? Well, we was looking at this kid named Belue, man, but, he went to Georgia. I said, oh, yeah, that's that freshman that played against Georgia Tech at the end of the year. He said, yeah, man. So then I said, Valdosta. And I said, something must be in the water in Valdosta. Because I started thinking about Stan Roan. Then I looked at the athletes, Bryce Hunter. I know him personally, the late, great Bryce Hunter, through another friend of mine, Rusty Beatles, who played offensive tackle at Georgia. I saw Kenny Moore, who right now playing with the Colts, Malcolm Mitchell, Randall Godfrey. And then I saw where y'all title town. And I said, man, at that age, I know about this guy. When I moved here to Atlanta in 1996. I already knew about your history, brother. And I said, wow. And then I found out that you had visited Hill up there in Knoxville. And I'm thinking right now, what would have been like if you wouldn't have went to Georgia and you went to Tennessee, you would have played with that smoke like Willie Goat. You would have been throwing 2. Mike Miller, you would have been throwing 2. Anthony Hancock, you would have been throwing 2. Dale Wilson, all those guys are first and second round picks. But right now, tell us why that water's so nice down in Valdosta.
Yeah, all those are legendary names. And I had a chance to play with Anthony Hancock in the East-West Shrine Bowl. And he, is one of the practices out there real quickly. Hancock says, man, we just gotten on the field. And he says, I need you to throw me the deep ball. And I'm thinking, gosh, we hadn't even got warmed up yet. And I saw this white limousine pulling out and parked on the 50-yard line on the far side of the field. And the chauffeur got out and opened the back door, and out gets Al Davis. And he's got all white on. And Al Davis is leaning up against that limousine. And I thought, I knew immediately why Hancock wanted me to throw him that deep ball. He wanted Al Davis to see him run under that thing, show that speed off. But
did he have the spectacles? He had those spectacles that he never wore them, but hardly. And then the little bit of the hair was just flowing all over the place. Al Davis was the same for 50 years, wasn't he?
Yeah, no doubt, man. What a legend! I'll never forget that moment. The growing up in Valdosta thing. I just can't imagine there being, for a young athlete, a better place to grow up. And I grew up watching. There was a head coach, Wright Bazemore, who, if you played for Bays, and he was the coach, I think, for 27 years at Valdosta High. If you played for Bazemore, you won a state championship. He won like 14 state titles in 27 years. And he was way ahead of the curve, man. He was he was running a pro set offense. Everybody else was in the wing tee. He was spreading the field. He was putting the running back in motion and flooding one side of the field. They were throwing the ball down the field, and I thought, wow, this is exciting. I can't wait when I'm a high schooler and get a chance to play for Coach Bazemore. And, he retired, unfortunately, before I got a chance to get to high school. But he became the athletic director, and then he came out to practice and was like the head official. It was one-on-one in practice at Valdosta. It was the ones versus the ones, and you were in full pads. There was none of this taking it easy stuff going on. And, I had a chance to let him sort of mold me into the young quarterback that I was at the time. And just can't imagine there being a better place to grow up than down in Valdosta. And just such a pleasure to see all these great players like Stan Rome play the game. Stan and I got to be friends through the years and actually worked out together during the summers back when we were both playing. So it was a thrill, man. It prepared me big time for the college level. I got to Georgia, and we went in the quarterback room. I remember the first day, and the coach, Bill Pace, got up and got on that dry erase board, the chalkboard at the time, and he was drawing up defenses and coverages and blitzes, and I thought, man, I know all this stuff. And I said, I'm the most educated guy in the room. So it gave me a big advantage competing against the other players, just having grown up in the Valdosta culture. It just prepared me big time to go up and compete at the college level.
1980. My junior year in college. That year, y'all beat Tennessee to open the season 16-15. Harper's going to ask some questions about that game. But there's one play in that game that changed that game was Bill Bates' fumble. You know what I'm talking about. But that Saturday morning, I'm watching y'all play Florida. Herschel Walker goes, but I think 75 yards for a touchdown. I said, man, you know what? Georgia going to run the doors off them. So what I did with some friends of mine, we went out and shot basketball at the rec hall on campus at the University of Arkansas. So I come back. It's fourth quarter. The TV room at Grayson Hall is packed. I said, man, what's going on? Man, Florida's finna beat Georgia, man. They getting ready to beat Georgia. I come in the TV room. Next thing I know, y'all got the ball on the 8-yard line with 1:35 to go. I said, man, how did y'all get down trailing Florida? First play, I think you got knocked out of bounds. I think maybe a 1-yard sack. Second play, I think it was maybe an incomplete pass. The third play, you rolling out of the pocket. And I said, if I ever met you, Mr. Buck Belue, I was going to ask you that play. You rolling out. You did that. You pointed. And you threw a laser. See, people don't talk about the pass. They only talk about Lindsey Scott catching it. But you put that thing on the money, and the rest is history. I want you today tell me, Vincent Turner and Harper LeBel, that play and you being in that body, what was it like, man? Today here on 100 Yards of Football.
Well, the night before the game, Lindsey and I were roommates on the road. So when we went on the road, and he was in my suite in the athletic dorm at the time too. So we played against each other in high school, and we became best friends. And so he was my roommate on the road. And before that game down in Jacksonville, Lindsey had a tough year. We weren't throwing the ball a heck of a lot, and so the ball wasn't coming his way very much. And he had not even scored a touchdown going into that game. And so Lindsey was sort of, sharing his frustration with me. And as he did that, I was trying to come up. I was, okay, what am I going to tell him? I got to come up with something to tell him that's going to be helpful. And, when he got through talking about his frustrations, all I could come up with was, look, I understand it, but man, come on. I mean, tomorrow might be the day. Tomorrow might be the day that you make the difference. So let's keep the faith here. And, this thing might turn around tomorrow. You never know. And boy, that came through big time, that message to Lindsey. And look, before the play, I knew the ball was going his way. I didn't care if they had him in triple coverage because it was now or never.
Right.
The season hung in the balance. The national championship opportunity was there. That we didn't want that to slip away. So in the most desperation and a desperation time, you needed a big play. That ball had to go to Lindsey Scott. And, the friendship really paid off. The chemistry, the reps, the work that we had put in, and we had never once discussed that if you ever see me point, I want you to stop right where you are. Because they were playing an 8-man zone. They had a linebacker that was between me and Lindsey. And I needed Lindsey to stop and that linebacker to keep flowing with the play as I exited the pocket. And boy, I pointed at Lindsey. He stopped immediately. The linebacker kept drifting, and it gave me that alley to get the ball to Lindsey. And once he caught it, man, they couldn't have caught him on a Kawasaki that day. He was down that sideline. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
It's been 3 college football plays in my 64 years. It's made me get up out of my chair and say, I wish I was there. And I would really hug my father, Chester Turner, who's watching today, just shake him. It's your play to Lindsey Scott. That 64-yard run by OJ against UCLA in 1967, and that Vince Young 19-yard run in the 2006 Rose Bowl. To me, those are the 3 most exciting college football plays in my lifetime, Vincent Turner. Back to you, Harper.
Well, let's go back a little bit. You mentioned coaches. You've got Pop Warner. Wally Butts won the national championship for Georgia back in the 1940s. I don't know much about him, but I know he won a national championship, and that's enough for me. And then Vince Dooley, obviously, with you. When you signed with the Georgia Bulldogs, I'm sure there was a breath of fresh air in the coaches' room saying, we think we got our quarterback who we're going to. What was it like with Vince? I'm wearing my Irk Russell T-shirt right here. I got the Irk Russell Invitational. Some of the other great coaches that help motivate you, and not just you, Buck, but some of the other great players that have run through Georgia, especially at the time when you were there.
Well, look, I was looking for somebody I could trust as I made that decision. And, Coach Dooley was just immediately I felt like, okay, here's a guy I can trust. Everybody else, they were used car salesmen trying to sell you everything in the world, to get you to get on campus. And I was always a little leery of those people that came with a lot of promises. I can't say I really trusted or believed in a lot of those promises. And Coach Dooley didn't promise anything. He just said, look, you come up, you're the best guy, you're going to play. We're going to let you play baseball as long as you're contributing to the baseball program. The handshake meant something. And so, look, he was a hard man to please, though, as far as the head coach goes. But he was trustworthy, man, and that meant something. And that current situation, a bunch of sharks were swimming around, and just had a hard time trusting a lot of those other guys. But, it was easy to trust in Coach Dooley, and he was a man of his word. And it meant something when you did please him. That really meant something because, he was a hard man to please. But I appreciate his honesty and his toughness. We were used to getting coached up hard in high school at Valdosta High, and so I was used to being coached hard at Georgia. And just having Irk Russell on that staff was really special too. He's a guy that should be in the College Football Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And got a couple things holding him back there. I think he needed to coach one more year as a head coach to get in, but it was a pleasure being around him. There wasn't a player on that team that didn't love and respect him. It was a great compliment with Coach Dooley, the tough guy, the hard man to please, and you had Irk that put his arms around everybody, coaching up that defense. So the coaching staff was awesome, and that was a plus too. Going to college also. Now, look, Johnny Majors never let me forget about not coming to Tennessee, though. Every time I saw him after that, he'd say, Belue, I can't believe it. You let us down. We needed a quarterback, and you didn't even come our way. And, Bobby Bowden was the same way. He says, man, I can't believe you didn't come down. When Bobby Bowden came to visit us at home, and he left, and my mom said, son, now why don't you want to go play for a man like that? And I said, well, Mom, Coach Bowden's awesome, but he's already got 8 quarterbacks on campus. And she said, well, how do you know that? And I said, well, look, I looked at the roster. You got to do a little research here.
Yep.
You know, so I said, look, he's in great shape down there in Tallahassee with all those quarterbacks he's got.
And the technology was a lot different back then too, Buck, obviously. I mean, for you to do your own homework and being smart enough to kind of figure out where can I play and where can I play sooner and not have to wait behind this guy, this All-American or this starter. That was a key for your decision, as you just mentioned. What were some of the others? I mean, did you look at the roster that Georgia had and not only just at the quarterback position, but, hey, who will I be throwing to? And where are they at tight end? And what's the running back position like?
Well, Georgia had played 7 quarterbacks in 1977, the year before I was signing a scholarship. So I saw that. I knew that. They had played 7 guys. They weren't really happy, obviously, with any of them. So I knew there was an opportunity there. And I knew there was an opportunity at Tennessee, too. I remember telling Dad, look, I've made my decision. I'm going to go to Georgia. And my dad looked at me and he said, well, you better get in your car and drive to Jessup, Georgia, because Lindsey Scott is about to sign with Tennessee. Oh. And so, man, I jumped in my car, and it was, I think, as I recall, it's about an hour and a half ride over to Jessup from Valdosta. And I got over there, and I got a chance to speak with Lindsey. And, you know, he was saying, look, you know, they're not going to throw that football at Georgia very much, and they're throwing it at Tennessee. And you know, I had to go through, look, they're making a scheme change. They're going from the veer and we're changing things up. They're going to the I formation. So they're going to throw the ball a little bit more now. You know, you can trust in Coach Dooley. If he said it, it's going to be true. And so, you know, I just thank goodness Dad, when I told him that, said, you better get in the car and get over there and convince Lindsey Scott to come, because as you mentioned, you got to have a receiver that can go get it. And I knew, you know, we had another receiver, Amp Arnold, that was already on campus, that was a big-time player. So I knew receiver was covered. There were some tight ends we had that were awesome. Ulysses Pay Norris was one of them that, you know, did a lot of great things. And, you know, it just everything just looked like the right fit for me at the time. So I had to get Lindsey up there with me, man. And, you know, that's another thing Johnny Majors always gave me a little trouble about. You know, he says, man, you not only didn't come, but you took Lindsey Scott from us. And I said, well, Coach, you had Willie Galt and Anthony Hancock. You were fine.
And Tennessee had a strong running game, too. James Berry, we all know his famous son, Eric. Glenn Ford, who was the player of the year in North Carolina, and they had a young man out of Miami by the name of Terry Daniels that was highly recruited. But Buck, real talk, if you would have came to Tennessee, brother, you would have been throwing that football. And Tennessee might have been scoring a lot of points, because that was the real difference of Tennessee really being a good football team during those years. But
there's no doubt about it. And
we would have loved to have you, brother.
It was a hard decision. But, you know, looking back on it, I think I made the right call.
Yes, sir. You won a national championship.
Yeah. So speaking of Tennessee, Buck, you open the 1980 season and you're in Knoxville. You're down 15-2. Things aren't looking real good, but he didn't start. He's a late arrival, number 34. He didn't get there till after April. Most guys sign in early February. Yeah. What was it like for you when you hand off and you say, this kid in camp is doing stuff I've never seen anybody else do? That had to change your perspective from being, hey, do we have a chance to win the SEC, to wait a second, we might take this all the way. When did that start to creep into your mindset?
You know, he was another one where I got in the car and went down to Wrightsville several times to talk with him. As that recruiting process extended out with him, he was, you know, looking at Clemson and USC. And so I went to visit him twice down there. And, you know, he was playing, there was a region basketball tournament he was playing in. And so after the ball game, there was John Robinson from USC was there. And I saw Joe Paterno up there in the stands. I mean, there were some big timers in this old gym. The Johnson County gym down in Wrightsville, Georgia. And so the plan was I was going to meet him out in back of the gym and just get some private time with him. And that's what I did. I went out back and waited. And, finally he came walking out, and I said, look, we don't have much time together. And so I want to cut right to the chase. What can I tell you that's going to make you sign with us up at Georgia? And I told him, he said, just tell me what you think's important, And I said, well, he said, well, Coach Dooley said I'm going to be able to run track. And I said, well, he's letting me play baseball, so you can count on that. You can trust him on that. And then he reached up and grabbed his cheek, had a little goatee thing going on. I said, man, you're going to have to shave that. Coach Dooley's not going to let you do that. And we laughed, had a good laugh over that one. And he went on back inside the gym, and, that was the end of that. But, just answered a couple questions that he was thinking about, and told him he was going to have to shave that goatee. And, that Tennessee game, though, was crazy because in the first half, I think he played 2 plays in the first half. And so at halftime, Coach Mike Cavan, who's Kirby Smart's right-hand man up at Georgia right now, he was former Georgia quarterback and longtime running back coach. And I'll never forget seeing Coach Cavan at halftime go up to Coach Dooley and say, we got to get 34 in the game here in the second half. And Coach Dooley said, well, put him in there. Coach Dooley wasn't a big subscriber to playing true freshmen, especially on the road somewhere like Neyland Stadium. But Cavan didn't hesitate, man. He said, we got to get 34 in the game in the second half. And Coach Dooley said, well, put him in there. And boy, he ran crazy in that second half. I think going home on the flight, though, we had a chance to win it all that season. Because, look, in the I formation, you got to have a difference maker at running back. And we had pretty much every other position covered. We had players at every other position. We didn't have a difference maker at running back. And in that I formation, he was going to get the ball a lot. And, boy, he took advantage of that. Herschel, one of the toughest guys I ever played with.
Yeah. True story. My sister, shout out to you today, Bridget. She living in New Orleans. She was a freshman. So she was at that game at the university, that first game. So she calls me on Sunday morning. Back in the day, you had to have calling cards. You couldn't, all this technology. And she told me 2 things. She said, bro, the running back, he's going to be something serious. The quarterback is nice. Don't be surprised Georgia take it all away. I'm going to ask you, one thing, I looked at that game yesterday 3 times to get ready for the show today. Now, my sister told me, because she was there, it was hot as hell. And that AstroTurf, with all those 95,000, she said it was unbearable. So one thing I took away from the game, Buck, man, it was a lot of turnovers in that game, man. Was it difficult? Because I know I had heard on some of your shows, you said it was real hot. You had problems with your center. So talk about why it was so hot and there was so many turnovers, because the telling part of that football game, it wasn't so much Herschel run over Bill Bates, but it was over Bill Bates, but it was Bill Bates fuming that punt in the third quarter that just totally changed the game. But come in on that game and come in on it being so hot that night.
Yeah, at halftime I was telling our center, you got to change pants. It's just soaking. I'd put my hands up in there to get the snap, and it's like the ball was in a swimming pool or something, Boy, he was saying, like, are you kidding me, right? You want me to take off my shoes and take off the pants and put the pads back in some new pants and then put these new pants back on? We had maybe 3 fumble snaps in the first half, so that was a real problem. And we had to get that straightened out in a hurry if we were going to win. So, yeah, it was pretty warm that day. And I tell you, I'll never forget that stadium, though. It seemed like those stands went up into the heavens. I mean, it looked like those guys in the upper deck and that back row, they were up in the clouds, looking up in Neyland Stadium. That was really a thrill to be able to play there and be a part of that atmosphere. But we didn't need that Delta flight home. We could have floated home, man. And sitting on that airplane, I thought, okay, we escaped with a win here. Get these snaps cleaned up, and we got a chance to do something special this year.
And how fragile it is when you think about it, if you lose that game, it could be a whole different season. So you mentioned something a moment ago that I want to touch on: the veer, the wing tee. You're evolving away from that as football did. Your ability to throw has a definite compliment to why that took place and how Georgia was able to adopt it earlier. But what was your input in terms of saying, I think we can do this. Let's try to hit the tight end down the middle. Let's run some deep crossing routes, and I'll go out to the flat every time I get a chance to. Your ability from high school to understand defenses in a different manner, I would imagine, helped propel that new type of offense, the pro eye, right? Talk about the ability for you to change while you're there on the fly and keep adding different tools to your offense to keep all of your opponents wondering, what the heck are we going to see this week out of Georgia?
Yeah, as I mentioned, in high school, we were throwing the ball around a lot, and I grew up really admiring the Pac-8. Those teams out west, the ball was going in the air. I was a big fan of Arizona State. The way they threw the ball around, I was a big fan of BYU and loved watching them play. And so that didn't go over very well at Georgia, man. I mean, Coach Dooley and I had a lot of one-on-one meetings in his office about the philosophy, and I was saying, look, Herschel can catch the ball. Let's throw it to him. He doesn't have to go through an 8-man box.
Yeah. Let's
get him out on the perimeter and throw him the football a little bit. He, there were times he thought I was very selfish when it came to that. And, I've tried to explain to him back then, and even some of the coaches right now, when I'll go over in a couple of weeks and watch Georgia scrimmage coming up, the Letterman will go back, and John Casey, our offensive line coach, typically we'll bump into each other, and he'll sort of laugh and say, Belue, I can't believe you were wanting us to throw that football a little bit more. And I would say, well, Coach, you don't believe we would have been better if Lindsey Scott had touched that ball more than twice a game? Because I believe that 100%. And I think I finally almost won him over, thinking about those things, But Coach Dooley, we had a meeting one time. I was determined that I wasn't going to let the media discover that I had some different thoughts on the offense. I tried to play along after the game when, a lot of these sports writers would say, Lindsey caught one ball today. What do you think about that? And I tried to skirt around it pretty good, but there was just one time I was a little weak that day, and I gave in and I made some comment about getting Lindsey the ball a little bit more. And it turned out it was in the paper, and I had Coach Dooley's secretary call me up on that Saturday night and say, Coach Dooley wants to see you early in the morning. So 7 a.m. got a meeting with Coach Dooley. And boy, I walked in, and he was sitting behind his desk, and he had that newspaper out on the desk, and he slammed his fist down on the newspaper and said, how dare you question what we're doing offensively? And he said, I'll never forget it. He said, Belue, I want you to do one thing. He says, I want you to pretend like the pitch sweep was a completed pass, you selfish son of a gun. Why don't you pretend like that's a completed pass so your stats look a little bit better? And he said, you can leave now. You can get on out of here. And boy, that door was shut. And I looked, and there was a little crack of about a half inch at the bottom of the door. And I didn't even have to open the door. I just sort of slithered out the bottom of the door there to get on out of that office that day. It was tough. I mean, we were winning though, so that made it a lot better.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the stats though. It was never about that.
Yeah.
It was just about, look, I just believed that when we play Notre Dame and we played the best teams, that we were going to be better with a more balanced approach offensively. It had nothing to do with stats or selfishness or anything about that. I just wanted the team to be better, so when we faced the best teams, we could go out and win.
Well put. I had the great luxury of playing against Jim McMahon in college. I played with him twice, and Jim's deal is, let's get the ball to the guys who can do something with it more than I can. And if they're in a certain zone, I'm going to find them. But that was a tough sell from a quarterback telling a coach, especially with a new type of offense. I didn't realize that there was that struggle and that dynamic. Agree with me, at least in part, Buck, in that there are still some coaches even today that will go, if you throw the ball, there's two bad things that can happen, right? You can have how ridiculous. On any play, you could have two or even three bad things that happen.
Well, we run it, the guy may fumble. So, yeah.
Exactly. Or he may get tackled behind the line of scrimmage. Isn't that a bad thing as well? I mean, it is what it is. Do me a small favor, though, in terms of changing the offense and all that kind of stuff, and throwing the ball a little bit more than what you're used to. That was an interesting dynamic, but also running that pitch, student body right, student body left, those work too. How were you able to call the plays, or at least be a part of the play calling process, to where you would recognize in the course of a game what would work when we needed it to work?
Yeah, I played a little bit as a freshman, played just a little bit. And, I was a part of a big win over Georgia Tech in the final game of the year. And we played in Stanford in the bowl game, East-West. We played in the Blue Bonnet Bowl in Houston. And I only got one series, and we drove 70 yards for a touchdown, threw a touchdown pass. In that drive, I never got back on the field again. And so I came back the next year and competing with the same quarterback, and we got off to a tough start, lost 3 straight games to start the season. And at that point, I got an opportunity to start, and we ended up winning and just never looked back from that point forward. So it was all about winning, man. Just got that opportunity to play that first game. It was in Oxford against Ole Miss. And, my father and grandfather made the trip out to Oxford. And after the ball game, I came out of the locker room, and my grandfather said, did you hear Coach Dooley with the media? And I said, well, yeah, I heard some of it, and I was leaving. And he said, well, did they say that you're the starting quarterback next week? And I said, no, I didn't hear that. And my grandfather, who had a couple of those, he'd had some of those miniature bottles he had taken in. He had probably too many of those. And he said, well, when he comes out here, I'm going to take a swing at him. And I told Dad, I said, you got to get Grandpa out of here, man, before he does something stupid here. We won. I knew I was going to be the quarterback from that point forward, as long as we kept winning. So, he got my grandfather out of there just in time before Coach Dooley came out of there. And, we were able to hold on to that starting job for the next 2.5 years.
Wow. Well, keep Grandpa away from those little, what were the airport, right? The little airplane bottles of,
no doubt.
Mixture, whatever the mixture was.
Yeah, I think he was into some of that bourbon everybody's drinking, it seems like now.
Well, we mentioned the Tennessee game to start. 1 or 2 words. Texas A&M the following week, you beat the pants off them. It was 42-0. Anything special in the A&M game?
Well, during the preseason camp, Herschel really never showed this big playability that we saw during the season. And he had a couple of those, 15, 20-yard touchdown runs against Tennessee. But we just had never at that point had seen him get out in open space and show that speed off, that world-class speed that he had. But we saw it that day against Texas A&M. He took a lead draw early in the game, took it to the house, and boy, that stadium almost came down with those Georgia fans just going crazy. And, that was the first glimpse we had of the explosiveness that Herschel had was that day against Texas A&M.
Wow. What was the campus like? You could obviously feel that there was a little bit of a buzz going on. You didn't have 95,000 like you did in Tennessee, but you had 60,000. And when did you notice that the kids and the locals were riding this train a little bit differently than before? Whether this is a team that might have some potential here to really make a record-setting season for itself.
Yeah, Herschel just made it happen with some big long runs that you just never seen a guy that big. I mean, he had to be 230 pounds, running a 4.340. Nobody, these fans had never seen anything like that. And so, seeing him do that really got him excited, man. I mean, it was electric on campus. Everybody was talking about it. I'd go to class, and that's all people wanted to talk about was Herschel Walker. And it was at that point in time, man, I mean, you jumped on that train and you enjoyed the ride, man, because you knew it was going to be a special year.
When you're looking at all the great college running backs that played the game, I had an opportunity in my lifetime to see Eric Dickerson up close and personal and Walter Payton when I was 13 years old. You think about O.J. Simpson, Billy Sims, Earl Campbell, and Dorsett. Buck, is Herschel the best that you ever seen run the ball on the college level?
Well, look, Dorsett was amazing. He was amazing. And my first recollection of a big-time running back was O.J. Running that pitch sweep out there, that offense out at USC, and just amazed with the talent he had at the time. And, I got a chance to play with 3 Heisman Trophy winning running backs. I got to play with Archie Griffin in the USFL.
Okay.
Got a chance to play with Mike Rozier in the USFL, and those guys were special. And, I was a college football fan, so I was totally into, all the big-time players. Herschel was special because he again at 230 and running that 4.3, great hands. We never took advantage of really him as a pass receiver, and so he could do it all, man. He was tough. I mean, that Notre Dame game and the championship game in the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame, they had the #1 defense in college football in 1980, and had a number of guys that went on to play in the National Football League. And boy, they separated his shoulder in the first series of the game. And, it was the first possession we had, and he left the field after I think it was the 3rd play. And we could look over there from the huddle to the sideline and saw the doctor with his hand up under the shoulder pads, feeling that shoulder joint. And boy, I knew, there was some trouble at that point in time. Man, there was some blank stares in that huddle at that time, but amazingly, he sucked it up, man. He came back on the field. He adjusted his running style. Instead of, putting his head and shoulder down into the tackler, he ran more upright and took some really big shots because of it. But he told me later, he said, Buck, there was no way I was going to miss that game. I mean, you live a lifetime for that opportunity, and he wasn't going to let some little shoulder injury stop him. It wasn't little, by the way. It was separated.
I know some people from Tallahassee, right, Buck and Mr. Harper, since I've been in this great area for 24 years. Some people think that 80 Florida State team could have beat y'all that year. That Florida State 1980 team, they was upset because they had to go to the Orange Bowl. You know the rest. But they feel like that team could have beat y'all that year. I'm putting you on the spot. Would Florida State been in the game with y'all, man, with Herschel?
Yeah, they would have been in the game. They would have been in the game. I so admired what Bobby Bowden was doing at the time. And Valdosta, it was like a driver in a 3-wood to Tallahassee. So it was close. We were in their backyard. And so I saw all of it. They were afraid to play nobody. They traveled all over the country, taking on the best teams in college football. They were throwing that thing too, man. That got my attention also. Dynamic offensively. And so, yeah, they were a threat. That would have been a heck of a game there. And I don't know if that defense was as good as what Notre Dame had that season, but offensively, they were certainly the championship caliber. There's no doubt about it.
Well, you mentioned some of the great players that Notre Dame had, obviously, their history. Now, the year before, some guy named Montana, I think you may have heard of him. He had, they played the year before, but this was Blair Keel, right? Wasn't he the guy that came in right after Montana? I'm not sure if he started in that game or not. Please forgive me for not reviewing it like Vincent did. But what was your preparation like for that? You got another week or so instead of a normal bowl game situation when you're talking about the national. I mean, the pressure on you. Vince wasn't very easy on you. You better not mess up this week in practice. Talk a little bit about the tension, and when did you just get a chance to relax, enjoy the moment, and just start playing?
Well, it was a good month. I mean, gosh, we played Tech 1st of December. One of the first days of December, and we didn't play until January 1st. So it was an extended wait. Very uncomfortable waiting that long to play again. And so we knew each other extremely well. If I saw that any more game film in Notre Dame, I was going to throw up. I'd seen so much of it, But I tell you what was interesting is when we got to New Orleans and they had some events, the Sugar Bowl had some events where both teams were at the event, and you got to interact a little bit. And Notre Dame they were overconfident. I guess because they were Notre Dame, they were the Fighting Irish, and that little old George has never won anything. We're going to wear these guys out. And we were at some function, and there was a defensive end, Scott Zedek was his name. He was an All-American too that year, Scott Zedek. And he came over and searched me up, and he said, "Belue, you might be over here laughing right now, but come game time, your ass is mine."
Wow.
And he turned around and walked off. And I think we're really motivated by their attitude, sort of discounting us. They were big bad Notre Dame, and they were just going to throw their jocks out there and win this game. And as fate would have it, in that game, Herschel took a sweep that they had. And they had the play covered to that side of the field. So he stopped and reversed. Like you see these guys in high school. Okay, they got me blocked off on this side of the field, so I'm going to reverse it and come all the way back around on the other side of the field. And I looked up, and there was Zedek, and he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Herschel, and I just took him out at the knees, and chopped him up good. And boy, when he turned around and saw it was me, you could just see he was devastated that it was me blocking him like that, And I said, "What do you think about me now, Zedek?"
Love it.
Another question I got for you, man, that I wanted to ask today. I got you in front of me. You came out of high school, man. You was drafted in the second round baseball. That's serious, man. And there had to be a little nice chink change, some chunk change there. Did you really think about going to play baseball before you went to Georgia?
My dream was to play Major League Baseball. And so, I knew at the time, and we had been advised that if that's your dream, then, that these kids that sign out of high school, you got a better shot of making it to the show, making it to the big leagues if you sign out of high school. And so I understood that part of it. And that was my dream, was to play Major League Baseball. So I knew I was passing on this opportunity. It was a risk, and so I knew that, but I just wasn't ready to give up football, I just, and maybe if it was the Braves or the Dodgers or, the Yankees or the Red Sox, it would have been different, but
not the White Sox.
I mean, Dad called me and said, "Look, you've been drafted by the White Sox." And my first thought was, "Oh man, not the White Sox." They were wearing those softball uniforms at the time. They had collars on the jersey. They were tucking them in. They had like Bermuda shorts they were using out there. And the representative came to visit with us and said, "When you sign, we're going to send you to Appleton, Wisconsin." And I thought, wow, man. I don't think I'm ready to give up this opportunity that I have, playing both in college. And so I just accepted the risk that, I would get drafted again coming out of college and have the opportunity then. And so that was, sort of the deal with that. I had a teammate that got drafted. They had 2 second-round picks, and they drafted me and our third baseman. We won the state championship that year, and David White signed with the White Sox and went on and made it to AAA. He didn't get to the big leagues, but, we were able to stay in touch through the years. And, I followed his ups and downs in the White Sox organization. And, it was just it was a tough decision, man. It was tough. And Yeah, I think I made the right one, though. I, got another opportunity coming out of Georgia to go play some minor league ball and live out the dream, so to speak.
No kidding. Wow. Well, you weren't a bonus baby, but pretty doggone close. You had the opportunity to sign on the dotted line, and I know the University of Georgia is all the better because of it. You mentioned the Notre Dame game. What I noticed that season, Notre Dame had played Tech a couple of weeks earlier, and it was a 3-3 tie. And then you played Tech in the last game of the year, and you beat them by 18 points. I imagine that had something to do with how can these Irish be as confident as they are? The mutual opponent, and Tech was a pretty good school back then. Did any of that come into play for you at all?
Well, yeah, and I remember watching that game film, at least 20 times, just dissecting what Notre Dame was doing and how Georgia Tech was attacking them offensively. It was a 3-3 game. And look, I mentioned Notre Dame. They had the number one defense in college football, but they had one of the worst offenses in college football that year, too.
Yeah.
They were playing two quarterbacks, and Mike Corey was an upperclassman that they were starting at quarterback. And then as the season went on, Blair Keel was a freshman, and he got more reps as the season went on. And they had some talent over there on offense, but for whatever reason, it just never clicked for them offensively. So, look, we knew coming in we had a more balanced team than Notre Dame. And so if we just didn't go out there and turn the ball over a lot, I just felt like we had a chance to win it.
I'm gonna say some Georgia players, and I want you to give me quick answers about them, right quick. But Kirby Moore.
I got to know Kirby after. I didn't really remember getting a chance to see him play, but I knew his reputation, just outstanding student, a very successful player, and enjoyed playing a little golf with him through the years.
Matt Robertson.
We became close friends after his time in the NFL. He played with the Jets and with the Broncos, and we played on the Jacksonville Bulls and the USFL together, and we've been close friends ever since. I got a great respect for him. I drive by his high school, North Springs, here in Atlanta, on the way to work almost every day, and got a chance to play golf with him a couple of weeks ago on vacation down in Florida. But I really love watching him throw the football at Georgia. They had the other quarterback was Ray Goff. He was the running quarterback, and when they needed to throw it, they put Matt in there, and boy, he could spin it.
Eddie Meat Cleaver Weaver.
Weaver was. I'm just glad we were teammates. All right, this guy was intimidating, and he was taking no prisoners either. I mean, he didn't get that nickname. He got it by reputation. So I was thankful he wasn't coming for me. He was so quick. I mean, at 270, maybe 6 foot at a stretch, but 270. He was so quick playing that 3 technique in there that those guards and the center, they'd swing and miss on him all the time. He'd just come in there free, blowing up plays. I have him as one of the top interior defensive linemen that ever played at Georgia.
The great Billy Payne.
Yeah, I never really got a chance to know Mr. Payne at all. I knew about his career at Georgia and his reputation, and I'm afraid I may have said something that upset him because I still hadn't played Augusta National. So I'm thinking maybe it was something I said on the radio or something.
Yeah, we got to get that worked out.
Scott Warner.
He was the most competitive guy that I ever played with, and I just loved being on the same team with him. One of the ultimate competitors. And, I'm just thankful for him, too. At the time we had these, when we reported for camp, and they're about to do that tomorrow, we had these conditioning tests. And one year they had the defensive backs and offensive backs. We had to run 2 miles, right? We had to run the first mile in 5:30. And then they gave you a couple of minutes to catch your breath. And then you had to run the second mile in 5:45. And coming in, Scott Warner said, just follow me. I'll set the pace. And you just stay within a couple of steps from me, and we'll all make the time. He was a track guy, too. So, he was well-versed in keeping the pace and knowing what the time was. So, man, I remember just trying to stay on his heels, and I knew I'd be able to make that conditioning test. But one of the great return men in the game, tremendous cornerback. He had the ability to gamble and make plays and guess right. You didn't see him get beat on these big plays very often, and he would take chances that the other guys were afraid to take, and because of that, he's the College Football Hall of Famer.
And family, Jimmy Payne.
Yeah, Jimmy Payne was, again, I've got him as one of the top defensive linemen to ever play at Georgia. He could play inside. He could play outside. He could play defensive end or defensive tackle. He could play the run. He could rush the passer. Really quiet guy. Didn't say much, but he showed up on Saturday big time, man. And he came to Georgia. I think he was playing tight end a little bit, maybe in high school, but Irk Russell found a spot for him immediately, and he had an illustrious career at Georgia. We wouldn't have won the title without Eddie Weaver and Jimmy Payne doing what they did on that defensive line.
And when you look at how Georgia is now, and I got a lot of good friends in this area that are Georgia fans. And matter of fact, one of my friends went to North Springs High School. His name is Joseph Taylor. Lord have mercy. Every year, he says Georgia's going to win the national championship. But right now, I can't even talk to him because he's at another level. He said about 4 in a row. Did you ever think that the program would be at this level, putting so many players in the NFL? And be honestly, I got y'all picked number 1 this year. And I think y'all got the best quarterback in Carson Beck that's came through the program in a long time. Be honest today. Did you ever think Georgia would be at this level under Kirby Smart?
Hey, if we can get those boys to slow down a little bit, quick drag racing, they might have a chance to do that this year. The answer to the question is yes, and it had everything to do with the great talent in Metro Atlanta alone. Talking high school football. The state of Georgia, the talent all over the state. I just knew and believed that if, Georgia ever picked it up on the recruiting trail, that they'd be able to compete at every single year because of the great high school talent we've got in Metro Atlanta and the state of Georgia. Those boys down in South Georgia are a little tougher than these boys up here in Atlanta, I believe. And that mixes into things too. But, we had that great run in the early 80s, 80, 81, 82, 83. Was the most successful run in Georgia history until these last 4 years that Kirby's had this program the last 4 years. So, I believed it just based on the high school talent. And so they were able to pick up the recruiting and boy, they're playing some great football right now, man. If we can just get them to slow down a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Buck, you need to teach him because you had to race from one end of town to the other to go get Lindsay and then to go make sure Herschel stayed here. But you didn't mention getting a ticket in any of those. So it's a good thing that you avoided the law, so to speak. They need to do the same thing.
That 71 Mustang, it didn't have a big engine in it. It wasn't going to go very fast.
Yeah, but you can get about 4 or 5 miles to the gallon in a 71 Mustang. At 18 cents a gallon.
It looked like it was fast, but that engine was not a lot of pickup in that old Mustang.
Not a lot of muscle in that muscle car.
Yeah, for sure.
The expectations are high. Just yesterday, I'm at Falcons camp, and Lorenzo Carter and Randy McMichael are having a conversation about the Dogs and what they're going to do and how they got robbed last year, and they should have been in the playoff, and Bama this and whatever. The expectations are always high. If you look at Matthew Stafford, Eric Zier, David Green had a great career. The quarterbacks that Georgia has been able to produce, and Stetson Bennett wins too. It's amazing how many people are now running through this program and have ever since you've been there. What's it been like for you to be a guy that helped lay the foundation of that, and to see these kids come in? They've got better facilities than you ever had. They got better shoelaces than you ever wore, but they're coming to the school now because of guys like you and Herschel and what you helped put together back in 1980 and how you built from that?
I felt the need to reach out to all those quarterbacks that followed me after I played. We call it the quarterback club now, and we're all on a conference call, text message thing where everybody gets it. And I felt the need after I left to reach out to all those guys. And look, not all of them, became friends, but I felt the need to reach out and offer up whatever encouragement or insight I could offer up, and so I've gotten to know a lot of these guys and certainly appreciate the skill and talent that they've shown at the University of Georgia, from Stafford to the rest of these guys. It's been a real pleasure just having a chance to get to know them. And, it wasn't like I was going to give them any advice or anything, but, it was more or less just, reaching out, hey, I care, and want to see you be the best you can be, and sort of a mentor, for the guys that allowed that to happen. So I've been so blessed because of that. I couldn't wait to meet some of the guys. You brought up Matt Robinson. I knew Ray Goff. I saw him playing in high school. And so I couldn't wait to just meet some of those guys that played before me. So I just wanted to, continue that tradition a little bit of, just forming a little bit of a Georgia quarterback club.
Carson Beck, I think he's the best quarterback in the country coming into this season. From a pro prospect analysis, what would you rate him going into the draft, and what type of year you think he's going to have? Because I think from a physical standpoint, the guy, about 6'4", 6'5", but man, he can really throw that football. But your observations of Carson Beck coming into the season this year?
Well, just really proud that he didn't transfer. He had to wait his time. Yeah. 3 years he waited to get an opportunity. Most guys would have, cut tail and run by then, going to play somewhere else where they could actually start. So I really respect that about him. Stayed the course, improved, developed when he was a backup. And so that has paid off big time for him. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy throw that dig route, that deep crossing route, spin it like he does in there, can fit it into these tight windows that you're going to have to fit it in at the NFL level. He's more mobile than I thought he would ever be, too. I mean, you don't see him with a lot of long runs, but, on 3rd down and 6, he can pull it down and pick up that first down, keep the drive going. He's got a love for these fast cars too, but I think he's smart enough not to take that Lambo out there going 100 miles an hour. But
yeah.
He was a baseball player too. Originally he was going to go to Florida and play baseball. So, we've got that in common. Gotten to know him a little bit and just really like Carson and respect him. And again, I hadn't seen anybody throw that deep crossing route like he's throwing it.
Going into the new SEC this year, going to Boomer Sooner, the Horns of Texas. What do you see the Dogs doing in the new makeup of the SEC?
I was talking about it today on the radio show, was what they need to do in camp to be a championship caliber team. And they got some unknowns on defense, in the secondary in particular. They've had some great safety play over the last 4 to 6 years. And so they got to find somebody to play next to Malachi Starks, who's an All-American player. The cornerback spot, a little of unknown at cornerback. They got to get that figured out because they're going to play some teams that are going to come after them in the passing game. So defensively, there's some things they've got to figure out early in the season. Offensively, there are no weaknesses. The offensive line is one of the best in college football. Got a quarterback like you're talking about that's one of the best. The receiving group, I think the receiving position group is as deep as it's been since Aaron Murray was the quarterback back in 2012 when they made a run that was interrupted by Alabama. So I think, offensively, it's going to be fun to watch. Bobo does a great job with the scheme and the game planning and the play calling. Regardless of what some of the fans think, he's outstanding. So I'm really excited about the offense. I know they're motivated because even though they don't speak about it or talk about it, they did get the shaft last year, not getting in the playoffs. That was a crime, what happened to them a year ago. So I know they're motivated by that. If they can get some things solidified on the defensive side, I think they're going to be the team to beat.
They've laid the footprint in terms of the last 5 or 6 years of saying we can compete with anybody at any time, as good as any other school could possibly imagine. I'm thinking this year, Vincent just mentioned a moment ago, the additions of Oklahoma and Texas. Georgia has Alabama on the schedule this year. You may not get through undefeated, but you just got to be good enough to be able to be in the playoff. I think that'll be critical, and they've done that. What's it like for you as an alumni when you get together with a bunch of other alumni? Are you raising your hands? Are you as excited as if you never played and you were just in high school watching? Or is there a deeper, hey, we got to fix this now because this is the way Georgia football has to be? Is there a little bit of both of that? Or how is it for you being able to just watch and relax and enjoy it? Or because you're a part of it and you're a member of the quarterback club, you take it with a little more responsibility? What's it like for you, Buck?
Well, I love following the program, and this job has been a blessing. There was a point in time where I remember thinking, what am I doing, man? I mean, you're playing minor league baseball for 3 years, then you jump into the USFL, and you play football for a couple of years. I mean, what are you doing here? What kind of plan is this, But looking back on it, it was a real blessing doing what I'm doing now. I'm able to, really get in depth and talk in a knowledgeable way about the football and the baseball side, doing the sports talk radio thing. And look, I'm a Georgia man, but I'm not completely obsessed with this. I'm a husband and a father, and I've got a great responsibility going on there. So, I don't make it to every game, but I sure watch every game and pull for these guys and hope for the best for them. But, it's not something I'm completely obsessed with. It's, when I get together with the other Georgia guys, really we're talking about the great job Kirby Smart's doing. No head coach in college football is working harder than Kirby Smart, smarter than Kirby Smart. He does an outstanding job connecting with these 17-year-old kids, with the high school players and their families. Just doing he's got a special talent for that, and I don't think that's talked about enough. So they're able to recruit at a high level because of that. He is also hiring a great coaching staff like Coach Saban did, and I think this is something he learned from Coach Saban was when you're successful, other programs are going to come take some of these assistant coaches, so you better have a pretty good idea who you're going to hire next. And so he's done a great job of replacing Dan Lanning moves on, and Glenn Schumann is there. Put in Will Muschamp. I mean, he has done an outstanding job with the coaching. So, he relates to the teenager. He does a great job with the coaching staff. He's working as hard as anybody to win football games, And so when we get together, really, we're all amazed at the great job Kirby Smart's doing.
Final question for me today. First and foremost, man, thank you for coming on 100 Yards of Football. It's been one of the best presence in my life to talk to a legend. Really, because me and you in the same age, who came out of high school the same year. I've been knowing of you since I was 17 years old, Mr. Buck Belue. When you look back at everything you just said about your career and you going to the University of Georgia, what is one thing that you take away from that you can give another young man going to college playing big-time college football?
Yeah, it's the dreams can come true. You can outwork people. It's one of the things I learned at Valdosta my first year there. After all these years of watching them win the state championship, my freshman year, the starting quarterback quit the team 2 weeks before the season. The backup quarterback got injured. Next thing I know, I go from thinking I'm just going to stand on the 50-yard line cheering the team on to being the number one quarterback, and we go 3-7. We're waking up with 4 sale signs in the front yard. And my dad was saying, son, you're going to have to start playing better. We're going to have to move.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was just heartbreaking, But the season ended on a Friday night, and our coach Nick Hyder said the next season starts on Monday at 6 a.m. And we went to work, strength and conditioning program at 6 o'clock in the morning the following Monday. And he would blow that whistle to interrupt the workout, and everybody would stop, and it would get real quiet. Coach Hyder would say, "Gentlemen, we work while the opponent sleeps."
Yes.
And he would blow the whistle, and we'd get right back to work. We were 10-2 back in the state playoffs the very next year, and I learned a great life lesson at that point in time. You can outwork the opponent, and we're able to do it. Just so many life lessons, and I think that's one of the most important ones. Even in sports talk radio now, I just know if I put in the work, man, I can outwork some of the other guys in the business. I'm not going to mention any names, but that was one of the life lessons I learned is, you work hard, you reap what you sow. And so that's one of the things. And I just love the competition. I'll admit it, man. I mean, I'm hooked on the competition. I want to win and win in the worst way. And we'll do what it takes to win. So, yeah, I mean, these are some of the things you take with you when the athletics comes to an end. You take some of these things into life in general. You want to treat people the right way.
Amen.
My mom, taught me one of these lessons way back when at Georgia. Son, it doesn't cost anything to be nice to people. I've just been blessed to be around some great people and learn from some people that were awesome, and just trying to take a little bit from all those people and do the best I can, and it's worked so far.
You're a legend, my man. You're a legend. Don't forget that. I wish you would have went to Tennessee, though. I really do.
You had to throw that in, Vincent. You had to throw that in.
I'm from the 901, man. We breed the orange down in Memphis.
Yeah, I was thinking, man, it's hard to look good in that orange.
Come on, man. Come
can't
on.
spell citrus without UT.
Come on, baby. But Buck, real talk. T. Martin won the first BCS and was looking good that night against Florida State.
Hey, man, I'm just glad we, that Tennessee run, that run Tennessee had over Georgia. What was that, 10 in a row?
Yes, sir.
Back in the 90s. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just glad we broke that up a little bit.
Okay. Mr. Harper.
Well, Buck, thank you for being with us. Not only does it take great individual effort, as you have mentioned, the hard work, all of that, but when everybody else puts that together, when Jimmy Womack blocks, when Jim Blakewood blocks, when Lindsey Scott makes a big catch, and you got some guy named Herschel Walker in the backfield, national championships can occur. But it takes a group and an effort by everybody in order to make that happen. And thank you for sharing what you have about the history of Georgia football from prior to Vince Dooley. And we've even talked about Kirby Smart and where they are right now. And it's been a tremendous ride, especially where they are right now. It's good times to be a University of Georgia fan. So thank you for sharing with us. Vincent, anything else before we head out for the day?
I'd just like to say to our audience, we appreciate you, to Mr. Jeremiah Long for making it happen today, our producer, to the staff here at 100 Yards Football, to you, Mr. LeBel, outstanding job. For me personally, as I said, dreams come true. I never would have thought, me being 17 years old, I'd be interviewing a guy I read about back in 1977. That's God blessing. To my parents who still live in Chester and Inez Turner, thank you for raising me. And this young man, Mr. Benjamin Belue, he comes out of the same era I do. And he will sure remember this as I end the show today. It's all the way live, Lakeside. You know what I'm talking about, Mr. Belue.
Yeah, that's one of my
all
faves.
The way live.
That's one of my faves right there now. All the way live.
Sure enough, it's all the way live, Mark.
Harper, always admired the job you've done, from a distance there. And just appreciate you guys. Best of luck with the podcast. Keep up the great work.
Hey, one question I ask everybody, would you love to come back and talk some football with us?
Anytime, brother.
Yes, sir. Be blessed. Mr. LeBel, thank you. 100 Yards of Football. Y'all be blessed today.
all the way live.